But my name is Lexi Schlosser. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm coming from the University of Denver in Denver, Colorado. My role at the University of Denver is a faculty developer of online learning. So I support faculty in their, or I guess you call them staff, in educational development when it comes to teaching and designing courses in the online learning environment. So COIL fits very nicely into that. I've been doing COIL work for a couple of years now, 3 or 4 years. But more recently, I've been doing some more intentional design around opportunities for faculty to learn more about how to do COIL and feel like they can have a lot more support along the whole process from first general interest in COIL all the way to being able to design and run a COIL experience. I do have a QR code up here to all of the resources I'm going to talk about today and to the slide PowerPoint presentations. I'll show this a couple more times if you want to grab it later, and I can also have Gabriella share the direct URL link to it so you have what I'm sharing with you today. These are the guiding questions for this first part of the workshop, just really getting to know what COIL is, kind of what are the integral components of a COIL course or a COIL module learning experience, talking through some of the benefits and challenges of running a COIL, and then I'll share some examples of some COIL projects that we've seen at the University of Denver. I already kind of shared that, and I already had to share that. So what is COIL? I'm going to read this for accessibility. COIL is a specific pedagogical model of virtual exchange where students and instructors at institutions from two culturally and or geographically different areas are given the tools and space to work together through purposefully designed interaction in a joint module for the purpose of increased intercultural and global learning. So what does that really mean? I like to show this model because I think it helps you visualize what this looks like. So you've got the University of Glasgow, this is institution A. And then you've got the University of Denver, this is institution B. This could be any university, I'm just using us and you all for examples here. But you could have, they could be the same language, they could be different languages, they could be from the same discipline or different disciplines. And the students will still enroll in the credits at their home institutions. But what they'll do is there'll be some sort of collaboration between students from each institutional course. There'll also be some collaboration between the instructors as partners as you're designing and teaching that course together. Got a few bullet points here just to kind of reiterate what that is. So there's two, could be more, but we see two instructors in different countries develop a course together. They have some form of shared learning outcomes with activities that align to those learning outcomes that specifically promote collaboration. This can be done in an asynchronous or a synchronous format or a combination of the two. We have a lot of great examples of both modalities working just well in COIL. We tend to see them be at least 4 weeks to a full term. As you can imagine, different institutions have different academic term schedules, so it might not be realistic to do an entire term or semester with your partner, but you find that sweet spot of what works just right for you. Research, and I believe the University of Glasgow guidelines say that you have at least 5 interactions over that time, and you can have plenty more than 5 interactions as well, but 5 tends to be the minimum of what will work for a successful COIL exchange. It can be implemented in a brand new course or a course that already exists in your subject area. I would recommend doing it in a course that already exists. You're already familiar with the content, you know how you've taught the content before, so when you work with your partner, it'll be a lot easier to talk through kind of how you're going to navigate that, rather than reimagining a course from the very beginning. Like I mentioned, it can be from the same discipline or different disciplines. Some of my examples I'll share in just a bit show both of those and kind of how you might navigate that. Like I said, I'm going to say this again, students are enrolled at your own institution. They're not paying fees at both. They're not getting graded at both institutions. They're enrolled here. You're the one who assesses and grades them, but they're getting a lot of interaction with students from another institution. And COIL is a graded component at your institution. There's some accountability there. Students are required to participate in the exchange. There could be some optional additional opportunities to engage. Students might want to message each other on social media platforms, and that could be an additional benefit to their exchange. But there are some required graded components of that collaboration across institutions. I've got some additional pedagogical principles here. So it's a non-commercialized exchange of ideas, cultures, and experiences. there's not an emphasis on a financial exchange between institutions. It's really looking at the students and what they can benefit from this learning across cultures, across differences, and experiences. See if there's anything else I didn't mention that's on these slides. There's some sort of sustained interaction over time. So I mentioned 4 weeks is usually minimum, but it can go all the way up to several more weeks than that, depending on how it looks. It's more than just one interaction between students. And you're using a lot of different technologies to do this, which later on I'll talk about some technologies that I've seen folks use, and we'll see some examples there. Why might you want to do COIL? So a few that I've linked here. It really allows students to build connections and new relationships across cultures. I think access is one of the biggest benefits to a COIL exchange. Not all students can afford to go travel and study abroad during their university experience, so this gives them a way to be able to learn about another culture, meet people from other cultures, kind of grow their own personal and professional network. Through those global and intercultural developmental experiences. I also want to say I think there's a lot of benefits for instructors or staff to learn interculturally as well. Some of the student benefits that I haven't mentioned yet, I think the perspective taking is really the biggest one, learning how to see things from a different perspective. And while you might teach from other perspectives in your course to students, it's another experience for them to get to hear from folks, especially their peers, students that are similar ages and phases of life from them during their university experience. Also, there's a lot of self-awareness and growth that can take place for students in this type of environment, and they can learn some more personal and social responsibility as they leave the university and navigate whatever their career or experiences look like beyond that. But there's also a lot of, as we imagine collaborative learning, as we imagine collaborative learning, there's also a lot of applied elements to it. So when I talk a little bit more about what you're exactly going to design in your course, there's a lot of those collaborative group projects. So there's a lot of applied experiences that students are get to doing. It's not just talking to students from another university, it's really working with them.
Yeah, just to add to what Lexi is saying, as part of our experience that we did in COIL in the past 2 years, we were able to, with an ethical approval, we were able to organize focus groups. So we interviewed students and we asked them their opinion on the COIL aspect. And one very interesting comment that we had was from a University of Glasgow student. This was an MBA elective in third year. And the student was like, I now really understand what it means, that aspect of global communication, where I have to look not only for the words or the meaning of the words, but I have to look for the body language and the signs of what is happening around the room. So she was like, I actually now know what to look for when my students will feel that doubting feeling because they are not understanding. And the reason being because we ran our COIL and was with an Italian student, so we ran our COIL in 2 languages, Italian and English, because one of the tutors was able to speak both languages. On the other side, the Italian side, we interviewed them in their language because we wanted to do emotional coding. So what happened there, they said, and I just quote their words, they said, I started by feeling inferior because I was not able to speak the language, English, with the same proficiency as a native speaker. So I felt I was not good enough because I wasn't able to speak. But after this experience, I am still not able to speak English with the same proficiency, but I know that I can contribute actively and effectively to a project because COIL was project-based learning. So she felt as she had now been empowered by the feeling of contributing, actively contributing. So she decided to go for an Erasmus. Not with us, but still she went for an Erasmus. So that was for her the encouragement to apply for the Erasmus project because she felt I actually can do, so that I can do statement.
Thank you. And I just want to emphasize these 21st century skills here at the bottom of this slide, because since the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen the need for some of these skills to really be developed and to be emphasized in university courses. But students are learning what innovation can look like. They're being able to grow their digital literacy, and they're really getting to apply some of those life skills that they'll be able to take beyond the university experience. I also want to point out the University of Glasgow graduate attributes. These 4 were recognized by the University of Glasgow as being applicable through their COIL learning experiences. So these specific attributes are ones that we see in a lot of COIL learning outcomes. And then there's a few additional benefits for instructors when doing COIL. So we're seeing stronger student engagement. It's less of the instructor talking at their students and more of the students talking with one another. And I think students are having more fun in COIL experiences as well, so I think that's a strong benefit for instructors as they're navigating their teaching. We're also seeing an expansion of your own professional network. Learning how to work with colleagues and having colleagues across institutions and cultures can really help when it comes to research, service, and other things like that. I know Gabrielle has been able to do a lot of publications and stuff with faculty at other institutions, University of Denver being one of them. It's also an opportunity to strengthen some of your technology skills, so you have to use quite a few different technologies in order to facilitate a successful COIL exchange, and I think just growing that skill is really important as well. So a couple of examples here to sort of end this first part. This one is the University of Denver partnership with a university in Chile. It was a mathematics course partnered with an engineering course. It was a 4-week-long exchange. Students in both courses spoke English and Spanish from varying degrees of fluency. They did report some communication issues, but they were able to work through them successfully as the 4 weeks went on. They identified some goals here, and some of those goals might have been different goals from each of the partners, but they established some similar goals as well. Some of the activities I like to point out, I think this is where people perk up when they hear about COIL because they want to know what are my students actually going to do. But what they did is they had some weekly synchronous meetings for students to discuss some problem sets together. And those problem sets obviously aligned with both course learning outcomes and helped them in their assessments as well. They had group discussions and presentations of those problem sets. And students were also given introductory videos to watch and were able to share videos with one another as well. Some students at the University of Denver took what we call the intercultural development inventory so that they could reflect on their own growth through this virtual exchange. The university in Chile did not have their students do that, and that is totally fine as well. We see assessments looking differently across different institutions dependent upon what their assessment standards and expectations are, because those can vary too. These obviously were a hybrid of experience modalities, so there was some synchronous meetings and that worked for them given the different time zone considerations, but then there was some asynchronous work that students got to do sort of on their own time. As you can see, they use a bunch of different technology platforms for this to be successful, and I think some of the ones that aren't always mentioned in this are the ones that students opted to use on their own, so apps like, what's the texting app called? WhatsApp? Yeah, WhatsApp for messaging, or some students use Facebook or Instagram or things like that as well. So we have a ton of different technology platforms that they're using. The second example here is the University of Denver partnered with the university in Japan. The two disciplines were communication and English, so there's a lot of similarities there. This was 5 weeks long, and the purpose for Japan partnering with the University of Denver was that their students were majoring in learning English, and so this gave them an opportunity to get to practice those skills, and that was their primary goal with the exchange, versus the University of Denver was really trying to get their students to interact with folks from different cultures, and so their goals might have looked a little bit differently there, and had some different learning outcomes, but you can see some of those mentioned here. Some of the activities in this exchange, they shared introduction videos asynchronously, they got to share readings, and they got to use a really cool technology to engage with those readings in an asynchronous environment together, which I'll show you that technology later on. They did some joint seminars, and then they had students paired up for those entire 5 weeks in groups where there were multiple students from Japan and multiple students from the University of Denver. In each group, so I think there was like 4 to 5 to 6 students in each group. And they got to analyze different scenarios on the course content topics. They got to work through, make some decisions, and it culminated in a written artifact between those groups that they were then assessed in their own institutions on that written artifact. This also had hybrid, so there was some synchronous opportunities and asynchronous opportunities. Some instructors choose to make those synchronous optional engagements if it just doesn't work with the time that the class typically meets based on some of those time zone differences. And some of them can work it out so that they meet perfectly at the right time, but that's just something that you navigate with your partner as well. This last example, I think I have some time, is not a University of Denver example, but 2 different universities were able to meet over 6 weeks. These ones were a little bit different of disciplines where there's a political science and international relations course, an anthropology course. Students in both universities were fluent in English, so there was not as many language barriers here. They identified some goals between both partners, and then they had activities. These included interactive blog posts. They were able to partner up and do a research project with some presentations on along each step of the research project. They had a joint midterm, which they were able to do in a synchronous environment, and they did some simulations and then culminated it with some reflective essays. So students got to not only reflect on what they learned, but reflect on that experience collaborating with someone from a different university in a different country through their learning experiences. So there was some asynchronous and synchronous interactions here, and then you can see those technologies that they used as well. That was a very quick overview of what COIL is and kind of a snapshot into what it looks like. So I'd love to open it up to any questions you all have, and you'll be able to answer those now, or those will be answered in the later presentations.